What if I told you that there's a dark force living inside your mind right now, sabotaging your happiness, destroying your relationships, and keeping you trapped in cycles of self-destruction? This isn't some mystical entity or external demon. It's something far more terrifying because it's part of you, and you've been feeding it your entire life without even knowing it exists. Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant minds in psychology, discovered this hidden destroyer of human peace and gave it a name: the shadow. But what Jung revealed about the shadow goes far beyond what most people think they know. This isn't just about your dark side. It's about a psychological force so powerful that it can literally hijack your entire life, turning you into your own worst enemy. Right now, as you're watching this video, your shadow is active. It's influencing your thoughts, your emotions, your reactions to what I'm saying. It's the reason you feel triggered by certain people, why you repeat self-destructive patterns, why you feel angry, ashamed, or anxious in ways that seem to come from nowhere. Your shadow isn't just causing problems. It's the source of most psychological suffering in the modern world. But here's what makes this truly disturbing. Jung discovered that the more you try to be good, the more you try to be perfect, positive, and socially acceptable, the stronger and more destructive your shadow becomes. The very attempts to eliminate your darkness actually feed it, creating what Jung called the return of the repressed, a psychological eruption that can destroy everything you've worked to build. Think about the last time you felt inexplicably angry at someone, the last time you said something cruel that you immediately regretted, the last time you acted in a way that was completely unlike your normal self. That wasn't weakness or lack of self-control. That was your shadow taking over, expressing the parts of yourself that you've been trying so hard to deny and suppress. Jung's revolutionary insight was that the shadow isn't an enemy to be defeated. It's an essential part of your psyche that contains tremendous energy and potential. But when you reject it, when you pretend it doesn't exist, when you project it onto others, it becomes a destructive force that undermines everything you're trying to achieve in life. The shadow forms through what Jung called the persona, the socially acceptable mask you wear to fit in and be approved of by others. From childhood, you learn that certain parts of yourself are unacceptable. Your anger, your selfishness, your sexuality, your aggression, your neediness, your weirdness. So you split off these qualities and push them into your unconscious, where they form a separate personality that Jung called the shadow. But here's the crucial point. These rejected qualities don't disappear. They gather in your unconscious, becoming increasingly autonomous and powerful. They influence your behavior in ways you don't recognize, sabotage your relationships through projection and acting out, and create internal conflicts that drain your energy and peace of mind. Modern neuroscience has confirmed Jung's insights about the shadow in remarkable ways. Dr. Timothy Wilson's research at the University of Virginia shows that up to 95% of our mental processes operate outside conscious awareness. Dr. Daniel Kahneman's work on cognitive biases reveals how unconscious patterns systematically distort our perceptions and decisions. What Jung intuited about the shadow, science has now proven to be neurologically accurate. The shadow manifests in your life through what Jung called projection, the unconscious tendency to see in others the qualities you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. The person who irritates you most? They're probably reflecting your own rejected shadow qualities back to you. The political figures you despise, the personality types that trigger you, the behaviors that make you feel morally superior. All of these are mirrors showing you aspects of your own shadow. This is why Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Your emotional reactions to other people are diagnostic tools that reveal the contents of your shadow. When you feel intense judgment, criticism, or disgust towards someone, you're encountering parts of yourself that you've disowned and projected outward. But the shadow doesn't just project onto others. It also sabotages you from within through what Jung called shadow possession. This happens when rejected aspects of yourself suddenly take over your behavior, causing you to act in ways that seem completely out of character. Road rage, explosive arguments, self-destructive binges, cruel comments, these are all examples of shadow possession. The most insidious aspect of shadow possession is that it often happens when you're trying to be your best self. The perfectionist who suddenly explodes in rage. The people-pleaser who becomes passive-aggressive. The spiritual seeker who becomes judgmental and superior. The harder you try to maintain your persona, the more likely you are to be hijacked by your shadow. Jung discovered that modern society systematically creates what he called shadow inflation, the accumulation of rejected psychological material that eventually reaches a breaking point. We're taught to be positive, productive, and socially appropriate, but we're given no healthy outlets for our darker impulses and authentic emotions. The result is a collective shadow that manifests as violence, addiction, political polarization, and social breakdown. This collective shadow is why you see so much hypocrisy in the world. Politicians preaching family values while having affairs, spiritual teachers abusing their power, activists becoming the very thing they claim to oppose. When individuals and groups fail to integrate their shadow, it erupts in devastating ways that destroy credibility and cause immense harm. The key insight Jung offered is that peace isn't achieved by eliminating your darkness. It's achieved by integrating it consciously. This process, which he called shadow work, involves acknowledging, accepting, and ultimately transforming the rejected aspects of yourself into sources of strength and authenticity. Shadow work begins with what Jung called active imagination, the practice of consciously engaging with the rejected parts of yourself rather than continuing to suppress them. This isn't about acting out destructive impulses, but about creating a dialogue with your shadow, to understand what it wants and needs from you. The first step is recognition, becoming aware of when your shadow is active. Pay attention to your emotional reactions, especially the intense ones. When you feel rage, disgust, superiority, or overwhelming judgment toward someone or something, your shadow is being activated. Instead of dismissing these feelings or acting them out unconsciously, use them as opportunities for self-discovery. Jung developed a technique called shadow dialogue, where you literally have conversations with the parts of yourself you've rejected. When you notice yourself judging someone harshly, ask yourself, what quality in this person am I rejecting in myself? How might I possess this same characteristic in a different form? This practice transforms projection into self-awareness and reduces the emotional charge of your reactions. The next level of shadow work involves what Jung called shadow integration, consciously reclaiming the positive aspects of qualities you've rejected. Your anger might contain your capacity for appropriate boundaries. Your selfishness might contain your ability to prioritize your needs. Your aggression might contain your power to protect what matters to you. Every shadow quality has both destructive and constructive potential. Modern research in emotional regulation supports Jung's approach to shadow integration. Dr. James Gross's studies at Stanford show that suppressing emotions actually increases their intensity and negative impact over time. Dr. Susan David's work on emotional agility demonstrates that accepting difficult emotions without being controlled by them leads to greater psychological flexibility and resilience. But Jung's most radical insight about the shadow was that it contains what he called the golden shadow, positive qualities that you've rejected because they didn't fit your self-image or family dynamics. Maybe you rejected your creativity because your family valued practicality. Maybe you rejected your leadership abilities because you were taught to be humble. Maybe you rejected your sensuality because you were taught it was shameful. The golden shadow is often more difficult to integrate than the dark shadow, because reclaiming positive qualities requires you to expand your identity and take greater risks. It's easier to admit you have anger than to admit you have untapped potential for brilliance, leadership, or creative expression. The golden shadow asks you to become more than you've allowed yourself to be. Jung discovered that shadow integration happens through what he called holding the tension of opposites, learning to contain contradictory aspects of yourself without trying to resolve them prematurely. You can be both kind and fierce, both humble and confident, both independent and vulnerable. Psychological maturity involves expanding your capacity to hold complexity, rather than splitting yourself into good and bad parts. This process often involves grieving the parts of yourself you sacrificed to maintain social acceptance and family harmony. Jung called this the legitimate suffering that comes with conscious development, the pain of recognizing how much of your authentic self you've abandoned in the service of fitting in and being approved of by others. The shadow also manifests in your relationships through what Jung called projective identification, unconsciously choosing partners who carry your rejected shadow qualities. You might be attracted to people who express the confidence you've suppressed, the rebelliousness you've rejected, or the emotionality you've denied. These relationships become battlegrounds, where you fight against aspects of yourself through fighting with your partner. Understanding this dynamic can transform your relationships from sources of conflict into opportunities for growth. Instead of trying to change your partner, you can ask yourself, what is this person expressing that I need to develop in myself? How is this relationship showing me parts of my own shadow? This shift from blame to curiosity creates space for genuine intimacy and mutual development. Jung observed that the shadow often emerges most powerfully during midlife crises, career transitions, and major life changes. These periods of instability weaken your usual defenses and allow suppressed aspects of yourself to surface. What feels like breakdown is often breakthrough, your psyche trying to restore balance by forcing you to acknowledge neglected parts of yourself. The collective shadow manifests in social and political phenomena that Jung called mass psychosis, the way groups project their collective shadows onto other groups, creating enemies and scapegoats to avoid dealing with their own darkness. Understanding this dynamic can help you maintain your psychological independence during times of social chaos and avoid being swept up in collective shadow projections. The ultimate goal of shadow work isn't to eliminate your darkness, but to achieve what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, integrated person who can consciously choose how to express all aspects of their personality. This requires what Jung termed moral courage, the willingness to face uncomfortable truths about yourself and take responsibility for your complete psychological reality. Practical shadow work involves several key practices. First, dream analysis, paying attention to the characters in your dreams who embody qualities you reject or admire. These figures often represent shadow aspects seeking integration. Second, active imagination exercises where you visualize dialogues with personified aspects of your shadow, asking what they need and how they can be expressed constructively. Third, emotional archaeology, tracing your intense reactions back to their psychological origins. When you feel triggered, ask yourself what childhood wound or rejected aspect this situation is activating. Fourth, creative expression, using art, writing, music, or movement to give voice to suppressed parts of yourself in safe, contained ways. The transformation begins when you stop seeing your shadow as an enemy and start seeing it as a source of vitality and authenticity. Jung discovered that the shadow contains tremendous creative energy that becomes available once you stop fighting it. The very qualities you've rejected often contain the keys to your greatest potential and deepest fulfillment. Your anger might contain your passion and sense of justice. Your selfishness might contain your ability to self-advocate and create boundaries. Your darkness might contain your capacity for depth, mystery, and authentic power. When you integrate these qualities consciously, they become strengths rather than destructive forces. Jung emphasized that shadow integration is lifelong work, not a one-time achievement. New layers of shadow material continue to emerge as you grow and face new challenges. The goal isn't perfection, but consciousness. The ability to recognize when your shadow is active and choose how to respond rather than being unconsciously driven by it. The peace that comes from shadow integration isn't the superficial calm of suppression. It's the deep serenity of wholeness. When you stop fighting parts of yourself, when you stop projecting your darkness onto others, when you stop being hijacked by unconscious forces, you discover a natural state of inner harmony that doesn't depend on external circumstances. This integration also transforms your relationships with others. When you own your shadow, you stop needing others to be perfect. You become less judgmental, more compassionate, and more capable of genuine intimacy. You can love people fully because you've learned to love yourself fully, including your imperfections and contradictions. The collective healing that Jung envisioned begins with individual shadow work. As more people take responsibility for their own darkness instead of projecting it onto others, society becomes less polarized, less violent, and more capable of addressing real problems instead of fighting shadow battles. Jung's warning about the dark force destroying your peace isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to empower you. Once you understand how your shadow operates, you can transform it from a destructive enemy into a powerful ally. The very force that has been sabotaging your life can become the source of your greatest strength and authenticity. The choice is yours. Continue being unconsciously driven by rejected aspects of yourself, or begin the courageous work of integration that leads to genuine peace, power, and psychological freedom. Your shadow isn't going anywhere. The question is whether you'll make it your enemy or your ally. The dark force Jung exposed isn't something you need to eliminate. It's something you need to embrace consciously. When you do, you discover that your greatest enemy becomes your most powerful friend, and the peace you've been seeking was always available on the other side of acceptance.